And with that, would like to bring on our amazing guest, Dr. Purdy, who is the Chief Medical Officer at Open Loop. And as you know, here at Women's Health Tech Wednesdays, we love questions. So if you have any for Dr. Purdy during our conversation, please feel free to pop them in the chat, and I will make sure that we find some time towards the end of our discussion to get to it. So with that, we'd like to formally bring on our guest. Hi, Dr. Purdy. Thanks so much for being here today.
Hey, Nina, thanks for having me. I am so excited to chat with you about all of this today.
Woo, we are too. Well, would love if maybe you could just kick things off by introducing yourself to our audience and really just, walking us through your journey and your background.
My goodness. Well, I'll try to make that as brief as possible. My name is Laura Purdy. I'm a family medicine physician, board certified, licensed in all 50 states, and I currently reside in Nashville, Tennessee. My journey, I started out in my early years as a professional musician and a concert pianist, diverged away from that and joined the military in the Army to go to medical school and chose family medicine. So I got my family medicine education there. I went to medical school at the United States, the military medical school in DC. Then my first few years of practice were there. And as I was getting out, I decided through a series of events that I wanted to work in digital health tech or telemedicine when I got out of the military. So I we would say like cross-tapered those two careers. I wound down the military. I spun up the telemedicine. And since I got out, I have been working with a variety of different companies in several different capacities, went back and got a business degree and found that I love business. I love innovation. I love startups, digital health tech, and I actually love the business more than the actual practice of medicine. So fast forward to today, I'm trying to change the world one company at a time, and I think it's working.
That's amazing. Wow, from concert pianist to amazing innovator, that is incredible. What a career. Would love if you could share a little bit more kind of about the work that you're doing right now with Open Loop, and kind of really what was the catalyst for you to kind of go down this digital health or telehealth path?
Yes. Well, we're going to talk a lot about parenthood and specifically womanhood today, right? So I would be remiss if I did not tell you the exact reason I went into telemedicine was because in the Army, I did not make enough money to put my kids in school. And in the Army, there's no way to make more money. There's no way to earn extra income. If you want to work more, you're welcome to do so, but your pay does not increase. So, right. So as a mother at the time of 2 children, I was pregnant with my third. My husband was deployed. I was a hospitalist in the military. I needed to work more. I needed to make more money. And telemedicine was the obvious way to make that happen. So, but I found that it was exciting. It was innovative. It was the future. It solves so many of the problems that we have in our current healthcare system. So inefficiency, problems with access, pandemic type situations, cost transparency, trying to fit everyone's life into this 9-to-5 brick and mortar clinic lifestyle. We don't live in that world anymore, and telemedicine solves all of those problems.
Absolutely. And I love that, I think we always talk about telemedicine and digital health from accessibility kind of on the patient side, but I love that you brought it up as a provider as well. Telemedicine makes that so much more accessible and really provides opportunities for providers. So I love that. I think that's also like the other side of the coin when it comes to really the benefit of something like a digital innovation. So I think that's awesome.
It really is. And you asked about Open Loop, right? So let me address that, because I don't want to leave that out. The reason why Open Loop, when I look back at the history of the evolution of telemedicine, I think about it in terms of generations. The first generation was the direct-to-consumer, cash pay, urgent care, very restrictive. Then we opened up a little bit to lifestyle medications, hair loss, ED, birth control, asynchronous. And, then we've kind of branched off into a few different things, remote patient monitoring, laboratory. But Open Loop is I would say the newest generation of digital health tech companies. And what we do is create solutions. So more of a B2B play, business to business, rather than business to consumer, which traditionally has been what the kind of last few generations of telehealth companies have been. And I love working at Open Loop because we get to craft unique individual solutions for all of the clients that we work with. And we get to get really creative, and innovation is a way of life at a place like Open Loop. And that's what I love.
That is incredible. And it seems like you're really able to like curate and find these bespoke solutions that are really tailored to whatever problem an organization is trying to solve. And I would imagine through Open Loop too, you're probably able to, go across the spectrum from the startup space to maybe like established organizations that are looking to like make a telehealth play, which I mean, I think sounds just really fun. But are there any drivers or any things that, to consider for organizations that are kind of looking to either dip their toes in the telehealth water or just dive right on in?
Yeah, well, as someone so even prior to working at Open Loop, I have worked at some of the largest telehealth companies in the country, and I've seen a few common problems. Even big, well-funded, long existing institutions are not as good as they would like to think that they are at innovating, pivoting, and creating new solutions. And I think that especially if you're an institution that has a lot of money and not a lot of time and a lot of rigid systems, it's better to find a vendor rather than try to create it yourself. Because if you are not an expert in the thing that you are trying to create, it's not going to go well. And I've seen it happen many times. And I think finding an expert like Open Loop that is an expert at crafting telemedicine solutions, and that's not your core competency, that is the clear best answer to me, because I personally would never want to try to do something from scratch that I'm not good at if there's somebody who could do it for me.
Absolutely. No, I wholeheartedly agree. Yeah, and I think that like being able to have a lot more of those types of solutions that are B2B, I think is just going to make things so much easier for organizations that are trying to scale. So I love that that was kind of your focus for Open Loop, to be able to provide that B2B lens. Would now love, I mean, I know one of the topics that we really wanted to really talk about during this conversation was, I think, just about you as a, amazing working professional, and kind of what it means to be able to start a family and kind of how those two intersect. Would love if you can share a little bit more kind of about your experience in the space. I know that you kind of had already shared some of the limitations or the barriers that you had to face kind of as a working professional, but would love if you could expand on some of the experiences or observations that you saw within that realm.
Yes. Well, I will say that everything I'm about to say, I would hate for anyone to ever generalize it to their own experience, because I'm going to tell you what has been like from my experience and what I've lived through. And I understand that it's not the same for everyone. But one of the things that we have learned, and when I say we, I mean me and my husband, is that there are quite a bit of discrepancies in the way that, in our instance, men and women are treated when they choose to become a parent, but also are in the workplace. In 3 out of my 4 pregnancies, 3 out of 4, and the 4th one was during COVID, so maybe I got a free pass during that one. I was actually called into meetings or contacted by my boss to do work while I was in labor. And I don't mean that they accidentally called me and said, oh, hey, and I said, actually, you know what, I'm in labor, can this wait? And they said, oh gosh, so sorry, no. Literally, we're told, I know you're in labor, but we need to have this meeting. Can we do it now? And I said, sure, can I have my epidural first? And then we'll get back to work, right? 3 out of 4, and the 4th one was during COVID. Do you know how many times my husband was called when I was in labor and asked to go to a meeting?
I think I know the answer to that question. Yeah.
Never. No time did that ever happen. And it was always assumed that I would be the one, even though we were both full-time, both working, both having like heavy, busy schedules, and both becoming parents at the same time. It was always expected that I would be the one to make the sacrifice to accommodate the children. And at one point in time, I did say, when he was going to get stationed across the country, I said, oh, okay, have fun taking all the kids with you. And he kind of looked at me and I said, oh, did you assume they were going to stay with me? Not that I didn't want them to, right? Of course, of course they would have stayed with me. I can't, I would be brokenhearted, but that's not the point.
Yeah.
The point is the assumption.
Absolutely.
I'm going to be the one to take on the responsibility. And I feel like there is no shame in choosing, because we have a choice. We have uteruses, we have bodies, and we can choose to have children and become mothers if that's a role that we want to take on. And
Right.
I would challenge and encourage women to not be ashamed, to be proud of that choice, and to not let themselves or anyone else make them feel guilty if that is the choice they choose to make.
Absolutely. And I think, you're really touching on, I would say, a very pervasive theme. I would imagine that, a lot of folks that are listening have had their own experience of something like this, of this discrepancy, and would love if you could kind of share, for those that are looking or are trying to, to play this role of being a mother in the midst of their career, what were either some advice that you have or just some experiences and some maybe lessons learned that you can share when it comes to being able to navigate, what it means to want to be a mom within the midst of their career.
Absolutely. Think about it this way. Just because you choose to have a career doesn't mean that you stop thinking of yourself as a daughter, a sister, a spouse, a cousin, a neighbor, a best friend, a dog mom. I mean, you don't you don't give up. There's no other role in our entire lives where we assume that we have to give up that role because we have a career. So why is it that we assume that we have to give up or sacrifice or do a less good job at being a parent because we decide to have a career? It makes no sense.
Absolutely.
A career doesn't make me less of a good friend.
Yeah.
Being a bad friend makes me less of a good friend.
Right.
Right?
Absolutely.
And the same thing applies to parenting. If you're a bad parent, you'll be a bad parent regardless of whether you have a career or not. And I would argue that our children need to see strong, powerful, successful, career-driven women. Because if you think about it, it doesn't make a lot of sense, this traditional notion that the only place where a woman is effective and has value is in the home 24/7.
Absolutely.
Right? Because that negates every contribution that every woman has ever made to our entire world and society as a whole.
100%.
Makes no sense.
Yes.
But
and I love how you really, go for it.
Oh, well, to answer the second part of your question, the way that I have come to think about it, and my children are starting to get older. My two oldest are 9 and 7. Now we think about it together. They help me prepare for trips. They help me.
Love that.
They organize my jewelry, which they think is fun. I think it's really boring. Out shoes together. We talk about events. If I'm on TV, they watch. I send the link, they watch. I bring them back presents or a video with them from, the Golden Gate Bridge or wherever I am. And it's not this like distinct division of my career and our life. It's all together, and we're doing it together. We're being it together. And that is a way more healthy way to think about it than this like two thing mentality.
100%. And I love that. I think it just goes back to what you previously were saying about just being able to like show children, kind of show this is what it means to kind of play this role. And this is what it looks like in a very affirmative and healthy way. So I love that you're finding ways to do that kind of within your own family. I think that's incredible.
It's fun.
I would also love to kind of talk to you and kind of get into the parental guilt. I think that's definitely something that we've heard a lot about kind of within women in the workplace. Can you explain, what it is, why it occurs so frequently, and kind of how you've been able to kind of experience and navigate it?
Do I have parental guilt? Absolutely, every day, because it's a part of our society. It's a part of our culture. And most of us have been raised up in this society that allows you to believe that if you're not spending every single waking second with your children, you're going to break them. And they'll be traumatized and emotionally scarred, and you'll be a bad parent, and they'll all be in jail and doing drugs. I don't know what the outcome is.
Right.
Based in this false belief that you cannot simultaneously be not 100% present all day, every day, and then also a good parent. But the fact of the matter is that we have to remember quantity does not automatically mean quality.
Absolutely.
If I spend every second of every day with my children, but it's not done with love, that's a traumatizing childhood. I'm not being a good parent, right? And I would feel more guilty about that. Simply leaving home, simply taking phone calls, simply traveling or being at meetings or going to events, in and of itself, does not make me a bad parent. It makes me try harder when I'm at home. It makes me love more. It makes me be more intentional with every word that I say, every reaction that I have, every single thing that happens between me and my children. I see, look, I'm getting a little emotional as I think about it, because I intentionally make sure that every interaction that I have with them is the most high quality that I can possibly make it, because we don't have 24/7, 365 together.
Absolutely. Oh, I absolutely love that. And I think it's so interesting, kind of the way you were talking about like moving with intention and being able to kind of have that. I think, you know, that in and of itself is this whole other skill set that I think you're able to access kind of through this role. So I think that is incredible. Also wanted to kind of ask you a little bit more and really get your thoughts on this idea of, you know, maybe folks that are a bit more nervous or anxious about kind of having to go back into work after having a child, and maybe some of those fears around like boundaries and things like that. And I think the story that you mentioned about, you know, how you were still asked to go to meetings when you were in labor. Is there any kind of advice that you have or ways to navigate, I think, some of those fears about, you know, I've set up this expectation of this perceived quote unquote performance. Am I going to live up to that? How do I kind of navigate going back into the workplace?
Well, life changes, circumstances change, and it would be unreasonable for your boss or your employer to think that you as a human will do, exist, and function exactly the same as you do today for the whole rest of your life.
That's right.
That's, you know, that's absurd. And things happen, whether it's having children or chronic diseases or marriages, deaths, relocations, you know, injuries. I mean, so much can happen over the course of a lifetime. And as an employer, as a boss, as a manager, as a leader, it is my responsibility, and it is their responsibility to be able to make space for that, and to have grace and mercy, and to remember that all people are humans, and humans are going to have human choices, and we all have a life outside of work, and our job is to support. So I would challenge everybody who's listening to this to think about the way you talk to a new mother, because you can make it worse. When I went back to work 6 weeks after my first kid was born, which is way too early.
Yeah, it sounds pretty early.
No, I heard, "I'm so sorry. That was the hardest thing I ever had to do. You must be devastated. I know that it's so difficult." And it's almost like imposing those feelings on that mom. What I would rather hear us say is, "Welcome back. Congratulations. How do you feel? Like, are you happy to have on real clothes and not be covered in milk and spit up for 5 minutes? Are you like, how does it feel? Congratulations. You've leveled up, because now you're a boss and a mom, right? And more empowering and encouraging in the way we talk to moms goes a long way in the way they feel about themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think one of like the common things that I always am reminded of is that language is so important. And so I think that just 100% exemplifies that. And I would imagine too, I think, you know, you've been able to, when you were an employee of an organization and now as an employer, it must be really amazing to now be able to really set a lot of that culture when it comes to, you know, these types of things. And I would have things kind of changed, or are there things or initiatives that you're doing kind of as a position of an employer?
Yes. So we have people who have babies all the time, right? People have babies. People want to breastfeed. And these are, and I will tell you from a managerial perspective, of course it's tough. Of course it's a challenge because the workload still needs to get done. And then you as the boss, and you're still going to be paying that person, right? But the workload still needs to get done. And so how do you navigate that challenge? But guess what? That is not the new parent's challenge.
Yes. Yeah.
My challenge. And I get to solve that problem in order to give that gift to my employee of time off with their family to recover and bond with their baby and be healthy, the most healthy version of themselves. And I've seen far too often where bosses have almost gaslit or projected the operational problems, operational challenges that come up when you have somebody out for a few weeks on a parental leave, that can get pushed onto the employee, and that's wrong. Don't do that. That's not their problem. It's your problem. And so what I do is congratulate, celebrate. If we can pull off, baby showers and gifts and shower, show me the pictures, I want to see the pictures, celebrating with them really strengthens that bond that you have, helps the parent not to feel isolated, because having a newborn is pretty isolating in and of itself. Helps them feel loved, helps them feel respected, a part of the team, and initiating. I would love to see the bosses initiate that conversation of, let's talk about your parental leave.
Right.
And don't assume that you know how much time they want to take off. The first time I really ever hustled and really, really hustled was with my third maternity leave. Actually, that was when I really learned how to hustle. So don't assume that the parent wants time off. But approach them. Don't make them approach you. It's very anxiety provoking for an employee to come to you and say, now that I'm pregnant, let's talk about my time off. That's a painful conversation. So I challenge the bosses to have that talk first.
I love that. That's an amazing next step for anyone who is listening. I think that's such an easy thing to implement as well. I have so many more questions for you, but we do have a question from the audience that I want to kind of cover now, since I think it relates to some of the things you were talking about kind of, these types of demands or this balance. So this question that we have from our audience member is, do you see a difference in the way remote versus on-site women are treated when it comes to work/life demands and balance?
Well, all I can say is how I was treated. Because I don't really do a lot of on-site work anymore, right? And so everything that I do is remote now, and that's all I see. But for me personally, yes, I'm treated quite differently working remote or working from home than I was when I was working in the hospital or the unit or the clinic, right? There was less grace, but that's because there was more rigidity. There's more rigidity in institutionalized anything. So it's not their fault necessarily. There's more constraints. But working remote and working from home, there's less constraints, there's more grace, and there's more opportunity for you to get things done outside of traditional business hours. I can work early, I can work late, I can work from the kid's doctor's office. So I think so, but I don't think that it comes from a place of lack of love for the parent. I think it's because of the inherent constraints in the system.
That makes a lot of sense. And thank you so much for answering that question. We also have another question. What are the challenges women face in the journey of becoming an entrepreneur?
Whew.
That's a meaty one.
All of them. No. Well, here's the thing, right? Let's not beat around the bush. There is 100%, there is absolutely discrimination, gender discrimination in the workplace. It is the case in the business field. It is the case in healthcare. It was the case in the Army too. My perception has been that we have to work a little harder to be taken seriously. And just for an example, the other day, I very sternly shared with someone that I was afraid that the thing that they were doing was going to put them at risk of being in violation of some laws. And I said it in my big girl voice, and they got their feelings hurt. And they went and told my boss, even though I'm 100% positive that the delivery was perfect and the tone was excellent, because I've worked on refining my delivery for the last 10 years. It wasn't well received because I was using a stern tone and telling them that they were doing something wrong. and they didn't like it. So I think that it is important as women who embody more of a feminine presence, which I clearly do, that we practice good emotional self-control, because we will be perceived as more emotional. Practice learning how to speak directly, which I am still learning how to do, because we're generally more communicative and we tend to be more like feelers and thinkers.
Right.
This is a generalization, right? And I think that we don't often have as many networking connections and people who are willing to do us a favor as our male counterparts. That is where the term good old boys club came from.
Yep.
And I've lived in those systems. I've functioned in those systems. And guess what, ladies? I have overcome those systems, and I have, and I can tell you with a 100% degree of certainty that those systems do not have to oppress you in the way that they have traditionally. But it's important that we act with self-control. It is important that we always act from a place of love, because if you approach people in love, and that's not the same thing as weakness.
Right. Absolutely.
But if you approach people in love, their response to you will generally be more amenable, and it will endear them to you, and you will have more power and influence. That's the secret. I just gave away the secret.
Wow, I absolutely love that. And we're really at time. So that's such a great way to end it. And I have honestly still so many questions for you. So we definitely at some point need to do like a part 2 of this discussion, because I think it was so inspiring, so informative. Thank you so much, Dr. Purdy, for taking the time to chat with us today.
Thank you for having me. I hope everyone feels like they are inspired and motivated and encouraged and feeling comfortable with the decisions they've made in their lives as a woman. Y'all are all doing great. I'll talk to you soon.
Love that. Thank you so, so much. Just wanted to also thank our next time for our next Women's Health Tech Wednesdays. Really wanted to give one last shout out to Dr. Purdy for an amazing, amazing discussion. And we will see you all next Wednesday. Bye, everyone.